Welcome to the I Made a podcast where we hear from podcasters about the wisdom that they learned since starting their own podcast so you can do the same. And now here's your host, Chris Curry.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of I Made a Podcast. I'm hoping that you're having a good day. And if you're not having a good day, I hope that this episode encourages you and helps to change the trajectory of your day so that you will be having a good day after you listen to this episode. Today, I'm speaking with Destinee Mackey. Now, she has a podcast called Boldy You. It's an amazing podcast, and we're going to dive into so much in this conversation. So I hope that you listen up. I hope that you can take notes and remember some things that we talked about today. And you can listen to this again if you forget certain things, if you're not in a place to write them down. But we went into so much, and there's a lot of things that you can learn as a podcaster from this conversation that I had with Destinee. So we're going to get into it. But before we get into this conversation with Destinee, I want to remind you of my podcasting cheat sheet. It's a list of resources, both software and hardware, that you need for your podcast, whether you're just starting out or if you've been podcasting for a while. This cheat sheet will help you with resources that you can get to help get you a better sounding audio or video, or help you in the editing process. There's a lot of resources there, and I call it a cheat sheet because a lot of these resources are free. But yeah, you can get this cheat sheet by clicking the link in the description, and you can download it and you can get access to it and try some of the resources and see which one of these resources help you in your podcasting journey. So that's all I got to say for now. Let's get into this interview with Destinee, and I'll be back at the end of this episode to close things off. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of I Made a Podcast. And today I'm speaking with Destinee Mackey. Destinee, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm grateful that you took the time out of your day to come on I Made a Podcast. Now, for everyone that's listening, can you just explain or share to us who you are and what your podcast is about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a boundary coach and a speaker, and I'm also the host of the Boldy You podcast. It's just called Boldy You. And I've kind of had a long journey, I should say, in discovering who I am, what I want to be, and what I want to help teach people or just speak to people about, connect with people about. So in my typical day-to-day outside of the podcast, I'm speaking a lot on people pleasing, how to overcome being a people pleaser, and learning how to build confidence and build a strong self-esteem. And that is a topic that is very passionate to me and something that I have struggled with personally for most of my life. And one of the biggest things in my journey that I found is I just wanted to be heard. I felt like I wasn't heard, people weren't listening to me, or I felt like I wasn't able to express myself. So one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to learn how to connect with people. So what I actually initially started doing, I was doing these Monday night live streams called Monday Night Live Stories of Our Lives. And it would either be me or I would have a guest that I scheduled to come on, and we would do just a little live stream. And if I had a guest, I would talk about them and their story, something that they wanted to share, that they wanted to be heard about, they wanted to be seen about. And I enjoyed the concept of it. I just hated using Instagram Live because it's so buggy and it's so slow. And I'm like, there has to be another way. So then I started looking into podcasting, and I made a really great connection with somebody. Her name is Colby Evans. She is the host of the I Wish I Never Said That podcast. And she was telling me some really great pointers. And she was like, oh yeah, you should totally just start a podcast. And so I started that journey, created Boldy You, and essentially it's the same idea as my Monday night live streams that I was doing, but it's in a podcast, so that way it's a little more contained, and you can edit things out and you don't have to worry about technical issues and them showing up late or forgetting or something. So I've really enjoyed doing it so far. I really love listening to other people's stories and their own experiences, and even learning some things from them, especially if they're things that I've never experienced before either. So that's kind of the gist of things.
Now, you said that you are a boundary coach. Can you maybe just explain to us a little bit more about what that is and how it fits into your podcast, Boldy You?
Yeah, absolutely. So boundaries are when you set essentially like a layer of rules with somebody or like a family member or with your job or with your partner or even with yourself. And essentially it's saying, I will not be taken advantage of. I will not be stepped on. I will make sure to put myself first. So it could be things like, I will not answer work phone calls if I'm not working. It will be maybe I need an hour to myself before I spend time with my partner so I can regenerate and refuel. Or maybe with yourself, it's committing to going to the gym, 3 days a week, or it's committing yourself to, not eating unhealthy. There's so many different ways that you can have boundaries. And I feel like it's something that we're starting to talk about more. And we have always felt like, maybe not everybody has felt like this, but a lot of people have felt the guilt to constantly put others first and make sure other people feel comfortable and other people feel happy that we forget to do it for ourselves.
That's true.
Yeah. And a lot of people feel selfish doing that. And that's a common thing when people start that boundary work and that journey. Like they feel like they're being really selfish. And people might even say that they're being selfish because it's a brand new behavior they're trying to implement. So, one of the things that I try to enforce with, clients that I work with, or even just people that I give advice to is, you are here on this earth for yourself. This is your body, this is your life. Yes, there are other people that you can still connect with and do nice things for. That's certainly, I'm not saying you can't ever do something for somebody else ever again, but it's making sure that you put yourself first before you take care of somebody else, because that's not your responsibility to only care for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear when as you're saying that, I'm hearing, when you go on the airplane, they say if the plane loses cabin pressure, the thing comes down and you got to put your mask on first before you help
Yes,
the person beside you. And that's the kind of image that I'm getting in my head right now, that if you are broken, if you don't have boundaries, and if you don't take care of yourself, how helpful are you going to be for someone else around you? And that thing
right,
about boundaries, oh, especially with work, like it is so important to make sure that you set those boundaries. And I understand that some people, may need to work overtime and stuff like that for their job, but when there are no boundaries, especially with your work and other things that you may be pulled to do, it takes away from some area of your life. It might take away
right.
from your relationships with your family. It might take away from your sleep. It might take away from your exercise, which you need to be healthy, and that's not good for yourself,
Mhm.
physically and mentally as well, right? So yeah, boundaries is something I think everybody needs to learn how to have those boundaries for their lives and how to make sure that people don't encroach on those boundaries, and how to, it might be hard for even people to say, hey, you're kind of pushing that boundary, right?
Right.
So you kind of back up. Like, I don't know how to say it right.
Yes.
I need to listen to more of your podcast to learn how to say it right. So I want to maybe invite everybody to listen to Destinee's podcast. I'm going to put links for your podcast in the description of this episode so that everyone can go and listen to it, because this topic of boundaries is something that I think is important for all of us to grasp. Now, what would you say? So before I was going to ask you what your favorite episode was so far, but I know that you have recently started this podcast, so it's a still kind of a baby podcast or a new podcast, right? You just started in January 2023. No, what is this? 2024 now? Oh wow,
Mhm.
yeah, 2024. So what's the upload frequency of your podcast? Is it like a weekly thing, or and how long are your episodes?
Yeah, so I upload every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just, I think it's a good time for if people want to like listen in their car on the way to work or something. Most of the episodes are only about a half hour long. I think I would like to do longer ones later, but I'm still, in the beginning process of this, and I'm still trying to figure out what I like, what I don't like.
Right.
And I've noticed when I talk to people, I just feel like there's not enough time to get
Mm,
through everything, and I could talk for hours and hours, and I'm like, I just think we need like 15 more minutes, or maybe we could do a full hour later. But yeah, so once a week, 30-minute episodes.
yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so yeah, like I mentioned, the link is in the description. You can go and check out Destinee's podcast. Now, get into that favorite episode that you have done so far. Which one of them would it be?
So that has aired. So I think the one that I really liked so far, that I would say is actually my favorite interview so far, is not my most recent episode, but the one before it. It's the one where I talked about the fear of birth.
Ooh.
And I've never had children. I'm not a mom. And I am personally somebody who fears the idea of giving birth, who has had that fear for quite a long time. And I know it's a very common thing that you hear now women saying, like, oh, I don't want kids. And, the birth process is really rough on your body and all these negative things. And so I had a guest, her name is Philippa Scott. She is a doula and she's a birthing coach as well. And we were having really great conversations with recording, off recording. And I'm
Mhm.
like, where does this fear of birth come from? Why is it so fearful? And how can, women like me who have never given birth, how can we overcome this fear? And what can we do about it so that way, if we do want to have kids, that it doesn't hold us back? And personally, I'm not somebody that wants children right now, but I still found it a very interesting and eye-opening conversation just to understand like her point of view and how she had such a positive upbringing with birth and I had such a negative upbringing with the idea of birth and how much that affects your beliefs regarding it.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, that's it. That sounds like a full episode. Maybe if it's possible, maybe because you mentioned before that sometimes a half hour might not cut it. Maybe you should just do like a part one and a part two because that sounds like
Mm,
it can be like an hour plus discussion, right? To go into
right.
the details of, just that how women can deal with childbirth and the mindset behind it, both from the perspective of people who have women who have never been mothers and mothers who are dealing with the effects after birth and all of the emotions and everything, the changes and everything that happens after birth. Yeah, so that would probably be a really insightful episode for a lot of women to listen to.
Mhm.
Again, both those who don't have kids and those who do have kids or who just had kids, to learn a little bit more about that process and the changes that are happening from someone else is an expert. Wow, that's actually really powerful. That probably would be a very powerful episode for someone to listen to. So
Right.
I listened to an episode a couple, I think you released it a few weeks ago, actually. It was, the person's name was Tommy Vincent, and the episode title was Ditching Your 9 to 5. I think she was talking about
Tammy.
Is it Tammy? My bad.
Tammy Vincent, you're good.
My bad. Yeah, the episode was Tammy Vincent. Oh yeah, Tammy. Okay, sorry, my eyes
You're
are
okay.
yeah. So the episode was Tammy Vincent, and it was about ditching your 9 to 5. And I found this episode was really insightful for me because so I'm doing this thing of my podcast now, and as we mentioned before we started recording, I'm also a podcast producer, but I do have a day job. And
Right.
what I'm actually hoping to do is actually allow this work of producing podcasts for other people to actually overtake what I'm making from my day job. And eventually sort of I don't need to do that because this is my zone of genius, my strength zone, producing podcasts, editing audio and talking with podcasters like you. So that episode was really insightful for me. There was actually something that Tammy mentioned. She said in that episode, every choice you make has led you to has to lead you to your end goal. And from that episode, that one comment really spoke to me because when you think about it, if you have to first of all have a goal of something that you want to achieve or something that you want to accomplish,
Right.
but if you and if you don't have that goal, then you're not going anywhere, first of all. But then after you have that goal, you then use that goal to govern the decisions that you make and ask yourself, is this leading me to that overall, that end goal? So that was something that was really impactful from that episode for me because of where I am. So I want to encourage everyone, if you're in, if you have share that same sentiment that I did, where you're looking to try to get rid of your 9 to 5 or try to step out and do your own thing, I want to encourage you to actually listen to that episode with Tammy Vincent on Destinee's podcast. It was really impactful, and there was a lot of good insights that she shared from that episode. Now, what was the some of the challenges that you had when you started this podcast? Now, I know it's still fairly new,
Mhm.
but what were some of the challenges that you had that you overcame or that you're still facing right now with your podcast?
Yeah, I think very common for everybody is just the imposter syndrome. Like,
Ah,
me, a podcast host, can I do this? How am I going to do this? Am I going to be able to keep up with the editing and the recordings and the scheduling and everything? And, I think after the first couple times you do it, you start to feel a little more comfortable with the flow and how it's supposed to run. And you're like, okay, this really isn't so bad. And I wouldn't even say that I worry about how many people listen and the uploads right now, because, like I said, I'm still trying to figure out that flow. And one of the biggest things about the podcast is I want it to be very real. And I know that it's a bunch of different types of topics, but it all comes down to the same point at the end, that you can overcome, this struggle, this problem in your life, and you can still make something beautiful out of it. You can still see the positive side of it. And that's really the message that I'm trying to get across. And I know right now on social media, it's really important to be vulnerable and open and honest and raw right now. Like, that is what people want to hear about. They don't want to
mhm,
hear, they don't necessarily always want to hear from experts or people and like research. They want to talk about the real, what is happening in everyday people's lives right now.
right.
So, anyways, long story short, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but long story short, yeah, the imposter syndrome kind of played a big role at the beginning, but I don't feel that way anymore. I'm just really enjoying the process.
Good, good, good. Yeah. And actually, I read a little bit about the imposter syndrome in a book that I recently read. I think it was called Personality Isn't Permanent by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, I think his name is. Excellent book. Excellent book. I would encourage you to maybe check that book out as well. It talks about imposter syndrome and how we grow and evolve as a result of our situations that we have been through, and that we can actually change who we are, that we're not a prisoner to the situations that we've been through in our life. So
Mhm.
if you want to become a world famous podcaster and reach millions, you can actually do that. Your personality isn't locked in, it's not going to stay the same. It's going to evolve as you continue to grow and set goals for yourself. So that was a
Right.
great book for me to read. And that the imposter syndrome was one of the things that he touched on in that book. Now, let me ask if there was anything with regards to podcasting. So, say for example, I say, "Hey, Destinee, I have superpowers, and I can change one thing about podcasting and get rid of it completely. One pain point, one challenge, one thing that just makes you want to just scream, and I could remove that with the superpowers that I have. What would be that one thing that you absolutely hate about podcasting that you wish would disappear?"
Hmm. That's a great question. I don't think there's anything in general about podcasting, but I think maybe it is the expectations when it comes to finding guests or being a guest. I don't know how you find your guests. I know how I found you, but I don't know if you use any other sources. But, you know, I feel like there are a lot of people who are looking for guests simply who have high numbers, who have large email lists, who have a successful podcast with so many downloads. And I understand from a business standpoint why they want to do this, but at the same time, I feel like you are missing out on so many good people because you are setting a number.
Right.
And I think that is, if anything, is probably the most frustrating part for me, because it doesn't matter to me how many downloads or followers or email list, whoever you have. To me, it's just about, what is your message? Can people relate to it? Is it valuable? And especially if you go by followers, you can buy followers, you can buy Instagram followers, you can buy Facebook followers. So
Right.
does it really indicate anything,
There you go. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, defining the guess part of it is actually challenging, I think, for a lot of people. For me, like way that I found you was just on Facebook in one of those groups. So I found that those Facebook groups where podcasters get together are really good for finding guests. So if you can join a group that is related to the topic that you are talking about on your podcast, and not only for you, Destinee, but for anyone else that's listening, if you can be in a Facebook group or page or whatever where there are a lot of people who are related to your topic, you can for sure find people to interview. But the challenge of whether they accept or not, based on the number of followers and stuff like that, yeah, I do get that. I've heard that quite a bit as well. That if you don't have so much followers, then I can't do your podcast, or it's going to cost you, so much
Right.
money or something like that, right? But then again, as you mentioned, you miss out on the message that the person is that person who you were talking to, or who you won't let on your podcast, right? Because their following is too small. You might be missing out on a really solid message that person has. So, I mean, I know some people run their podcast differently.
Right.
What can we can't tell people what to do with their podcast. So, but I would encourage everyone to just collaborate and work together, because what I've found that is when you work together and collaborate rather than compete or just focus on yourself, your own selfish goals for your podcast, it actually works out better. I think you I don't know if you've heard this before. What does it say? Rising tide raises all ships, or something like that. So if
Right.
we all work together, to collaborate, everybody will be, rise up together in
Hmm.
terms of getting their podcast out there, reaching more people, and helping each other. Right. And that's what I
Absolutely.
want to do. That's one of my main goals with this podcast. I want to help people, help podcasters with whatever I have, whether it is, just helping people learn about podcasting, or if someone contacts me because they want me to do the production for their podcast, whatever it is. I just want to help people. And that's the main reason why I started this podcast. I made a podcast.
Right.
So let me ask you, touched on social media a second ago, like Facebook. How do you promote your podcast? Are there specific ways or social media apps that you use, or what does it look like? So if you release an episode on a Monday, how does that promotion work for that episode that you're going to release?
Yeah, so typically what I do is the day before an episode is about to launch, I'll post like a little promo with the title if there is going to be a guest, and post that on Facebook and Instagram usually. And I say, oh, for this may be for people who are people pleasers, or this might be good if you're interested in this subject. We're launching this tomorrow, and I'll share it on my story. And then the day the episode launches, I create a video. It's like a clip from the podcast, and then I'll add a little snippet of, what the Boldy You podcast cover at the end of it. And I will share just probably what I think is one of the best clips from that episode that will try to grab people's attention on what that topic is about. And I'll share that also Instagram, Facebook. I also share that on TikTok as well. And I should do more marketing, but again, because I'm just so new, I'm still figuring out the flow of everything.
Mhm.
I think it could be a little bit better in terms of marketing, but again, at the same time, like it's not a priority for me to get like 1,000 downloads. That's not my whole purpose for wanting to do the podcast. For me, it's just to get a conversation going.
Right, right, yeah. So, the majority of your promotion is just on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and just pre episode launch, you would put out a flyer with just some indication of what the episode topic is about and some highlights maybe, and then the day of, you put out a little video. So you're taking the video for your podcast as well and using that as like a clip,
Yes.
right? Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. Good to know. Yeah. So these are all things that, like, as new podcasters, we learn and see what works best, right, for our audience, right? And I think as we continue to podcast and learn, we might need to tweak things here and there and change things and see what works and what sticks. And then once you find something that works, you can continue to, put your efforts into that one area. I know there was another podcaster that I spoke to who said that she promotes her podcast mainly on LinkedIn, that the Facebook and the Instagram is not the best place for her, but she has a financial podcast, right?
Okay.
So she's more dealing with people with, like, from a business perspective. So most of her listens and her downloads come from LinkedIn, right?
Right.
But again, wherever it fits, do your testing and check out, see how it works for you for your podcast, and then move forward from there. So let me ask, in terms of your toolbox, is what I call it, your podcasting toolbox. When we get into like the hardware and the software and the online tools that you use for your podcast, what do you use?
Yes. So I record through Riverside. It is kind of like Zoom, but it's on a website and they have their own editor built into it. And they also have this nice little feature where they can automatically cut clips for you. Like they'll cut so many sections of your clips. And that's actually what I use for
Oh,
my
nice.
marketing videos.
Mhm.
And depending on what plan you choose, you have so much recording time per month to use it. And you can download the episode at different qualities and has echo cancellation options for the background, like for guests who may not have the best options. But I use Riverside to record. I don't edit through Riverside. I actually use Descript to
Mhm.
edit. And for me, I really like Descript. There's some AI features that make the editing process go really quick. And my room tends to be a little bit echoey sometimes because I don't have carpet in here. So I like to use the studio sound option in there to make it sound like it's actually a little more
Right.
professional, less echoey. Also has great subtitle options. You can edit the transcript that it automatically uploads for you in there. You can identify who the speakers are. I just find it really simple, easy, and the best for your buck as well.
Mhm. Yeah. So what about your hosting?
My hosting, I use Buzzsprout at the moment.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Buzzsprout recently from some other podcasters that I've spoken to, and yeah, I actually heard that they actually have a podcasting course for new podcasters that it's free and you can just like sign up for it and take it and learn everything you need to learn about podcasting through that course. That's really, and so I've heard a lot of good things about Buzzsprout. Now,
Mhm.
I know I mentioned before we started recording about your microphone. What kind of mic is that? It's pink and it matches your decor, right? So
Yes.
so what kind of microphone is that you're using? It sounds great, by the way.
I don't even know what the brand is. Do I have a moment? Can I have a moment to look it up?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. I bought it months ago. I don't even remember. Let's see. I think I bought it late last year. Here it is. Okay. So it's on Amazon.
Mhm.
I bought it because it is pink. It's on brand. I had to get it.
Right.
It sold me. It is the Maono Maono USB microphone. And it also comes with like a pop filter. It comes with this cover for the microphone, like the little soft cover.
Mhm.
It's a really nice microphone to get started. I would love to get a more professional one down the road, but this one does the job for right now. But I think this is a really good starter. I have the arm attached to my desk right now too, so I can hold it up. I don't have to worry about it like on my desk down all the way down here. I don't have to hold it, and you can adjust it. You can make it higher, lower, you can bring it in, push it up or down.
Good, good, good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like so one of the things that I've mentioned to other podcasters as well in helping them start their podcast is I've mentioned to them that you don't have to get the most expensive equipment right off the bat. You want to get something that can record good quality sound. And it's important that when you go and go onto Amazon and see some of these microphones, take a look at some of the reviews, see what people who have purchased it have said about it, see how much stars review it is, and then you can make your decision. Don't put too much money into your podcast right at the beginning, because the
Mhm.
worst thing that can happen is that you start your podcast, you get into it, maybe 5, 6, 10 episodes, and then you realize that you start to burn out and you can't do it anymore. And now you have $1,000 worth of equipment if you spent it on the most expensive stuff, and you're not doing anything with it, and it's like a waste of money. So I would say start small, start inexpensive, and then focus on good technique when it comes to mic placement and editing your podcast. So I listen to you. So the microphone, like our conversation right now, it sounds great. I don't hear any echo or anything like that from your microphone. It sounds wonderful. Yeah, thumbs up. It sounds great. There are a lot of online tools that are available for podcasters, and actually a lot of them are free. So one of the things that and it's been blowing my mind since I've been doing this podcast, like I've been learning about so much of these online tools that actually can help you get better, audio quality. So what I actually did for if anyone wants this, they can go and download it. I created like a cheat sheet with a whole bunch of tools and resources for podcasters that you can go and download. So it has a lot of apps on that, like online apps that you can go and download, and most of them are free or have a free level to them. Like I know I have Descript on there, and there's another one called Alphonic that cleans up your audio. So if if like if the furnace is close by, like I'm in a basement right now and the furnace is just around the corner, if it cuts on right now, I can run that audio through Alphonic and it will take out the background noises, the room echo, and it's amazing. It has saved me. Literally, it has saved me a couple times with like buzzing noises in the audio recording. That instead
Okay.
of me having to re-record it, I actually ran it through that program and it removed it from the recording. So it has saved me. But anyways, that app and all of these other online resources, I put it on a cheat sheet. So again, I'll put a link in the description for everybody to go and get all those things, because yeah, it will help any podcaster out there. And again, like I said, a lot of these things are free or have a free level to them, so that you can at least use a portion of it for the month or whatever the case is. So in terms of your room setup, Destinee, what is going on in your room? How big is your room? I don't know. It doesn't look like a big room because we have video right now. How big is your room?
I think it's like 10 by 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's my office space. So I got the doors back there to go out in the hallway. I got my window here. You can't see it. I actually have some soundproofing right
Okay.
here that I put on my walls just because I don't have carpet in here. I have LVP, luxury vinyl plank flooring in here, so it's very echoey. I also don't have too many decorations in here to kind of absorb all of the sound either. But really, this is the majority of what's in here. I have my bookshelf, got my cat tree when my cat wants to come hang out with me, and that's really it. My desk all here.
Oh wow. Has your cat ever got on one of your podcast episodes yet? Like as a feature, maybe out in the
No, I
background, not
usually
yet.
lock him out because he's annoying sometimes. He likes
Okay.
to meow really loud or bang on the door. So I don't you don't want any of that when you're recording with a guest, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Okay, cool. So we're just about to wrap up this interview now, Destinee. Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to come on the podcast. Now, is there any final pieces of wisdom or insight that you want to drop for anyone out there listening regarding podcasting?
Yeah, I think, not only in podcasting, but in maybe your work or life in general, kind of goes back to the 9 to 5 episode that you said you listened to is, don't just chase after money. Don't just chase after the financial benefits. Have fun with what you're doing. Really
Mhm.
connect and love what you're doing and connect with the guests that you're talking to. Because if you do not have that solid foundation, that connection to just that alone, money will not carry yourself through your podcast if it doesn't do well when it starts.
Wonderful final comments from Destinee. Again, the podcast is called Boldly You, and it's available, I guess, on all of the podcasting apps out there, or most of them are the most popular ones. So it's
Yes, it's also on YouTube. If
on
you want to
YouTube
watch
as
on
well.
YouTube.
Yep. Good, good,
Yes.
good. Yep. So if anyone wants to, well, I'm going to make it easy for everyone. Links in the description for Destinee's podcast. And you can go and subscribe and follow her on all of the podcasting apps and connect with her on social media and be encouraged as she tackles some of these things that we talked about here today, specifically like boundaries and learning things about that from her podcast. So Destinee, thank you so much for being on I Made a Podcast. Yeah, I look forward to maybe connecting with you in the future. And who knows, you know what I think I'm going to do 100 episodes from now. I'm probably going to have like a reunion episode and get a couple people back on. That'd be kind of cool. I'll definitely throw an invite out to you to see how things are going, how you progressed. Maybe you might be on your 100th episode as well.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time. You're a great host, and I definitely look forward to being on in the hundreds episodes at some point. Just let me know.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, everyone, that's another episode of I Made a Podcast that is complete. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for listening and watching through the entire episode. Now, as I mentioned during the episode, I put links for our guests today in the description of this podcast. So you can go there and you can connect with them on social or follow their podcast, and you can listen to more of the content that they put out. And you can get access to my cheat sheet by clicking the link in the description. Now, if you just found the podcast, I want to let you know this podcast is available on all of the major podcasting apps. Just search I Made a Podcast on whichever app that you're using to listen to this episode right now, or whichever podcast app is your favorite, and you'll be able to find this podcast. The only thing that I'm going to ask you to do is put a 5-star rating and leave a kindly worded review so that other people can read it and know that they can expect to learn great things from this podcast. And I am grateful if you could do that for me. Now, as I always say on this podcast, the best time to start a podcast was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. So go ahead and make it happen. And I'm here to help you. So you will hear from me again next week on I Made a Podcast. Peace.